From earning 5 figures a month as a high schooler to building a billion-dollar business and only paying himself $70K per year, this is the crazy story of a man who tried communism and it worked. But there's a much darker side to this story: fraud, abuse allegations, lawsuits against brothers, and more. Dan Price was born on May 13th, 1984 in Michigan. In the early 2000s, he played bass in a band called Straightforward and helped run the business side of it. They were actually quite successful, playing in front of crowds of up to 5,000. There was a coffee shop where they frequently performed, and one day, when Dan was 16, the shop owner complained of the high credit card processing fees, which were affecting their profits on every purchase. These charges were, for example, something like 2.9% on every purchase, plus a 30-cent per sale flat fee, which really adds up over time. Dan took it upon himself to help them out and managed to renegotiate contracts, which lowered the fees for her. And after helping the coffee shop owner, other small businesses approached him for help to do the same thing, and before long, Dan was making up to $12,000 a month doing this. A few years later, in 2003, Dan went to Seattle Pacific University to study music. He was still running his side hustle, but by this point, instead of negotiating on behalf of clients for lower fees, he was processing payments himself using outsourced technology. And in 2004, he founded Price & Price with his older brother Lucas, who invested the seed money for the venture. Dan secured their first customer as an official company that year in his college dorm room closet. His roommate was playing loud video games at the time. Going back to our earlier figures, if another credit card merchant was charging 2.9% plus 30 cents on every sale, for 5,000 sales at $5 per sale, these fees come to $2,225, whereas Price & Price were offering lower rates, roughly 2.5% plus 10 cents on every purchase, which would bring fees to just $1,125. These are just example figures, but they show that they were saving small businesses a lot of money. So they grew fast, opening their first office in Seattle with 5 employees. By 2008, the company was the largest credit card processor in the state of Washington. But over the last few years, the brothers had had major disagreements within the company, so they completely restructured Price & Price, making Dan Price the majority shareholder and reducing Lucas's operational role while giving him a minority share. During this time, they officially renamed the firm Gravity Payments. And what happened next changed the trajectory of the company and Dan's life forever. After barely surviving the 2008 financial crash, they continued to grow, and on April 13th, 2015, Dan crammed his 120 employees into one room where he announced he would be raising the company's minimum salary to $70,000.
And we're going to have a minimum $70,000 pay rate for everyone that works here.
And reducing his own from $1.1 million to $70K. The story quickly went viral, spreading across the globe within days. Immediately, Dan obviously got major support for this. Former US Labor Secretary Robert Reich called Price the one moral CEO in America. Bernie Sanders said Dan sets an example that other companies should learn from. But there was major backlash. 2 long-serving employees quit because they felt it was unfair that newcomers were getting massive pay rises while the paychecks of the more senior employees didn't receive as big a bump. Rush Limbaugh, the talk show host, called Dan a communist. Some of their clients left as well because they feared that they would be charged more to compensate for the pay rises. However, most of the employees were so happy with their pay rises that in 2016, they pulled together to buy Dan a Tesla Model S. There's more to the story than meets the eye, which we'll talk about in a sec. But what effect did this have on the business? Well, in 2025, 10 years after the decision, the company claims revenue is up by 650%, employee count roughly doubled, and employee productivity, measured by revenue per staff, doubled. Gravity Payments also stated that their clients now stay with them more than twice the industry standard. So overall, many see this as an extremely successful business strategy. Many see Dan Price as a hero, but there's a much darker side to this story. What if Dan Price wasn't the guy everyone thinks he is? Remember how Lucas, Dan's brother, had a minority stake in the company? In 2015, a month before the $70K salary announcement, Lucas filed a lawsuit against Dan, alleging that Dan was compensating himself excessively, charging hundreds of thousands of dollars in personal expenses to the company, manipulating the valuations of the company in order to financially benefit himself, and slowly pushing for more and more control over the firm. In court, it came out that Dan had paid himself over $1 million a year over the past few years. And then, less than 1 month after Lucas's lawsuit, Dan announced the whole $70K salary thing. But he had strategically organized for reporters from the New York Times and NBC News to be there to ensure it got coverage. So was this set up to take the world's eyes off the lawsuit? After the $70K salary announcement, a documentary producer was looking to make a series about Dan Price. But while investigating, found some disturbing things. His report alleges that Gravity Payments had been routinely misclassifying restaurants that use its services as bars instead, which make them eligible for lower credit card processing fees. This violation of rules set by the credit card brands and big banks not only gives Gravity Payments an unfair pricing advantage over rivals, but puts the company and the small businesses using them at risk of being fined. The report stated that these misclassifications are happening unbeknownst to Gravity's customers. Based on the number of restaurants involved, the size of the scandal reportedly would bring in tens of millions of dollars. Stay with me, as that's not all that this documentary producer found in his research. In 2013, Dan Price had been living up his millionaire lifestyle. On one evening, he was dressed in all white and walked into a well-known Seattle bar and restaurant called Paddy's Coins. He was reportedly harassing people there, so was asked by the manager to leave. Dan refused, so the manager and bartender forcefully removed him. When outside, Price smacked the manager in the face using an open hand claw, which caused a laceration. He then grabbed his glasses, snapped them in half, and ran off into a nearby park. Police found him and arrested him. Unfortunately, the allegations just got worse. In a 2015 TED Talk at the University of Kentucky, Dan's ex-wife accused him of physically abusing her. Price completely denied these allegations, and the TED Talk video was deleted. Over the years, there have been abuse allegations from more than a dozen women, some leading to court. In 2022, Dan resigned as CEO in order to focus on fighting these allegations. The charges were dropped, and Dan has since joined Gravity Payments again in an advisory role. Don't go anywhere, as I've got another video I think you'll like. It's about Epic Games and the 20-year-old who founded it. See you there.